Michael Heizer is the son of an anthropologist. That much is clear throughout his work. Themes of ancient civilizations are prominent throughout his portfolio, particularly in his magnum opus, City. According to a longtime friend of his, Heizer treated his father's report on the ancient Olmec site in Levitated, Mexico, as his Bible. Robert Heizer, his father, was a prominent anthropologist at the time, teaching at the University of California, Berkeley, writing hundreds of works, and now, almost 50 years after his death, he is famous enough to have his own Wikipedia page, almost as long as his son's. Michael Heizer once accompanied his father on a dig in Mexico, tasked with making site drawings. He was also influenced by the work of his maternal grandfather, Olaf P. Jenkins, who was a geologist. Heizer was particularly interested in the rock sourcing of ancient monuments. After a brief time at the San Francisco Art Institute, which he dropped out of after only a year, Heizer moved to New York City in 1965, where he met artist Walter de Maria. Together, along with artists such as Robert Smithson and Nancy Holt, they would go on to create the movement known as land art. Land art is a movement characterized by exactly what its name implies: art that interacts with and is made from the land. The movement was born out of conceptualism and minimalism and sought to reject the institutionalization of art and take art outside of the gallery setting. In many ways, Heizer could be considered the main founder of land art. He first hosted the famous Robert Smithson and his wife Nancy Holt in his cabin out west a year after Heizer had created his first earthwork. Smithson would go on to study Heizer's father's work and promote the new movement, helping further it into what it became. He also ended up creating the most well-known earthwork, Spiral Jetty. Another key element in the growth of land art was Smithson and Walter de Maria's representative, Virginia Dwan, an art enthusiast and the heiress to the conglomerate 3M. She became enthralled with land art, often accompanying various artists on their land scouting trips. She would also soon fund Heizer's first notable earthwork, Double Negative. There is nothing here, yet it is still a sculpture. These were Heizer's words on Double Negative, an earthwork consisting of 2 trenches cut into the side of the Mormon Mesa in Nevada. As previously stated, albeit more succinctly, by Heizer, the sculpture intends to challenge the idea of what a sculpture can be, or even what art in general can be. It also asks the question of how you should view a sculpture this big, with each trench being 30 feet wide and 50 feet deep, and the entire artwork being about a quarter-mile long. Can you truly see the whole of the work from the ground? How feasible is it to see from the air? In 1970, when the work was completed, seeing it from the air would have been extremely difficult. Even now, Double Negative is difficult to visit. It requires driving through unpaved desert in an area with no service, and there are no marked pathways around or to the work. Such is the way of earthworks. Site-specific works are not often meant to be accessible and rely on the emptiness of the land around them to convey the feeling they are meant to. As Walter de Maria stated in his writing about my personal favorite earthwork, the Lightning Field, isolation is the essence of land art. This is certainly a theme amongst Heizer's work as well. In 2012, Heizer completed a sculpture he called Levitated Mass. It was 43 years in the making. He first attempted creating the work in the Sierra Mountains, but the 120-ton rock proved too heavy for the cranes he had access to. The project was then shelved until 2007, when Heizer, who had not learned his lesson the first time, found an even heavier rock, over twice the weight of the first one. This time, however, Heizer worked with the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, or LACMA, to transport the 340-ton boulder and put the artwork together. Through a carefully constructed transportation plan, the rock was driven 106 miles over the course of 11 nights to the museum using a 300-foot-long, 206-wheel transporter. There, they were able to successfully install it above a trench without any reported broken cranes. Though the rock was initially supposed to appear to defy gravity in its conception, hence the name, it has been installed onto support shelves for structural integrity, moderately impairing the intended effect. Even though this work technically was conceived over 43 years, there's a lot of the time in the middle we haven't covered, and Heizer is still alive today, which begs the question, what exactly was Heizer doing between the years of 1972 and 2022? This is undoubtedly the largest sculpture ever built. It sits at 1.5 miles long and half a mile wide, situated in what can be considered truly empty Nevada desert. It took Heizer 50 years to complete. The story of City is a long and tumultuous one. The giant landscape took $40 million to build and was almost compromised several times. First, in the 70s and 80s, railroad tracks for carrying ballistic missiles were almost installed near the site before they were vetoed by President Reagan. In the 2010s, a nuclear waste site was almost built nearby, but protesters and lobbyists, including a Nevada senator, successfully got President Obama to protect the 700,000 acres surrounding City as a national monument. The land City was built upon was reportedly acquired incidentally and was chosen simply for its abundance and low cost. Apart from its close calls of compromise due to federal activity, the location has been criticized by many indigenous writers due to the fact that it was built on Western Shoshone land. Some claim it reaffirms a settler mindset, as the land being acquired is treated and viewed as property, and that both Heizer and his father's work has a focus on extraction and destruction rather than preservation. Conversely, others appreciate his approach to monumentalizing the land and his use of local materials. Heizer has become increasingly reclusive over the years and has not spoken much about the work's meaning or even the process behind making it, but here's what we do know. First, it was made almost entirely from local clay, sand, and rock, with minimally invasive techniques so as to not overly disturb the natural environment. Second, making City destroyed much of Heizer's life. He was physically injured in multiple ways, developed polyneuropathy, which is the simultaneous malfunction of many peripheral nerves throughout the body, and lost several friendships, along with his wife. In making City, Heizer emulated the ruins he knew so well from his childhood, and thus, City stands tall, a reminder of ancient civilizations long gone. Heizer kept the area entirely closed to the public until its completion in 2022. Even now, the visit is restrictive. Visitors must be in groups of 6 or less per day and are driven out by a guide for a 3-hour visit. Photography is not permitted. The location of City is mostly kept secret as well, only being revealed through Google Maps satellite images. Here, Heizer reinforces that theme of isolation. In the desert, miles from any true civilization, with only 5 other people, you can't help but feel truly alone. People who have been describe it as a profound, intimate experience with the work, the land, and themselves. You may have noticed a theme throughout the last chapter. Michael Heizer is a secretive man. The reason for this was talked about by the old friend I mentioned in Chapter 1 in his book about Heizer and his work, titled Michael Heizer, The Once and Future Monuments. The friend, William L. Fox, has since fallen out of favor with Heizer for writing this book, for the same reason the artist is so secretive. Heizer wants his work to be seen on its own merit, without context. He believes if you are serious as an artist, you will sacrifice your own life for your art, which is exactly what he's done with City. He wants the audience to approach it with the same level of seriousness. This raises a question. Should City, or art in general, be viewed within context or stand on its own? Though I believe there is a merit to both approaches, I would always choose to know the context behind the art. I think City is infinitely more interesting knowing the history of Heizer's father's work. I've read several of the very few interviews Heizer gave during his lifetime during my research for this video, and reading the way he talks and chooses to communicate about his work has given me a valuable insight into his thought process, and told me things about City I would have never otherwise known. Even his histories with other artists and his grudge against Robert Smithson for taking so much inspiration from Heizer's life showed me how Heizer sees himself as a native of the West, and told me about his relationship with the land he built City on. Learning about the land's history with the Western Shoshone has also impacted how I view City, and has taught me to think more in depth about the unintentional meanings and implications behind City's location. Though Heizer would resent how much knowledge I have about himself and the work, I think my own interpretation of it has benefited greatly from the research, and though maybe there is something valuable about seeing any art piece for the first time without knowing anything, I would always want to be able to see it again after learning the context behind it. And with City as inaccessible as it is, most will only be able to see it in person once, if at all.